So we all know the new Star Fox Zero Redeeming Qualities game came out pretty recently. Like, not too long ago. Okay, it was a couple months ago. I haven't made a video in a while. And suffice to say, not a lot of people liked it. I mean, it's surprising, right? A game that we all loved as children could flank out as such a failure in the new market. But maybe not for all the reasons we think. It's true, Star Fox Zero had a lot of issues that could have been easily changed. But are things like bad motion controls, horrible graphics, are really that big of an issue? I am to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Star Fox, the lost love of the game we once knew and hoped would be better. Let's get straight into it. Let's go. Let's play. Let's fucking do this. There's nothing in this. This is a blank case. I lent the game to my brother. I lost it.
Now, if you're like me, you've probably been playing Star Fox since the Nintendo 64, back when the game had really sharp shapes and the controllers made your thumbs really sore. But Star Fox has been around since before then, first making its appearance on the SNES in 1993. It wasn't as fancy as it is now, and because of the limited graphical abilities of the Super Nintendo, a lot of the terrain was the same and there was no voice dialogue. Just think a Star Fox game where you couldn't hear the soothing sound of
Whoa! Help me! I guess I should be thankful. You're becoming more like your father.
All of the Star Fox games have a similar story. Star Fox and his best pals in the world sail across the Atlantic Ocean to defeat the evil Bowser and obtain the One Piece. Okay, maybe it's not quite like that, but it's close to it. Star Fox bands together with some trusted companions to take down the evil threat known as Andross, who threatens to destroy the Lilat system. And this all gets explained much more thoroughly in Star Fox 64. Or if you live in Australia, you can just call it fucking Lilat Wars. This is the pinnacle of 64 games, of all games for that matter. Star Fox 64 set a bar many games had tried to reach, but never have.
But what was it that made Star Fox 64 such an amazing game in the first place? Was it the story? Was it the graphics? Was it the gameplay? No.
It was peppy hair!
Do a barrel roll!
Alright, it wasn't peppy hair, but he's included. It's everything. Everything complements itself. The story fits perfectly with Fox's own personal goals. The dialogue of your comrades help you build an attachment with them. The gameplay is unique and interesting with perfect controls to handle. There were just so many good things about Star Fox 64. When I played it, I honestly felt as though Nintendo had gotten everything down pat.
And then this happened. A loose screw in the construction of a beautiful masterpiece, crawling its way into our GameCubes and parading around like it's more than it actually is. A pathetic excuse and a recreation of a masterpiece. Nay, this is not a sequel. This is not a game. This is an abomination.
Nah, I'm just kidding. It was actually alright. Well, not great from a review point of view. From a personal experience, I actually enjoyed it. Star Fox Adventure takes a different approach to traditional Star Fox games. Yeah. Originally meant to be a completely different game called Dinosaur Planet on the Nintendo 64, Shigeru Miyamoto liked the idea and suggested a Star Fox reskin and pushed it onto the GameCube. This meant that Star Fox standard corridor mode gameplay was somewhat removed in favor of a 3D adventure game with puzzles and lock-on targeting combat.
Now, while this didn't necessarily make Star Fox Adventure a bad game, I actually personally like some of the puzzles and combat a part of it. But from a serious point of view, this is not a Star Fox game. The core elements that make Star Fox aren't there. It would be like taking Mario and making him play tennis.
As far as puzzles go, Star Fox Adventure has done a pretty good job. As far as being an actual Star Fox game, well, it falls slightly short of the mark. The Owing missions seem more like short, fragmented memories of what could have been. Imagine someone who's only just played this game for the first time, and they'll probably just assume that this is something similar to the Kingdom Hearts Gummy Ship missions, just a fun way of getting from place to place, but not actually considering that this is what the game's core element is meant to be. A third-person, single-path, mission-based shooter, and not a 3D adventure game with dinosaurs. Whose fucking idea was this?
The next game in the series got a little bit closer to the roots, but it still didn't quite make it. Star Fox Assaults added in a lot of things that Star Fox Adventures gave up, but it also added in something just a little special.
Yeah! Land-based inaccurate third-person shooter mode! I've gotta admit, I was excited to play Star Fox Assault, right up until the 20-minute mark where I was forced out of my R-Wing, onto the ground and then told to make my way to the Landmaster. All the while trying to defend myself from land-based combat and defend Crystal from pulling a Slippy and getting herself killed. But to be fair, the combat that happened before that and after that was more true to the traditional Star Fox games than a lot of other Star Fox games that have come out. you got your R-Wing, you got your straight path, you got your teammates, you got your awesome battles in space. It felt like this was the sequel we wanted, but alas, the missions based on the ground mixed in with Fox's horrible ground control movement just let the game down so much.
See this? They go over to Star Fox and they made peppy hair front and center. Like, don't worry about the front cover, it's just the back. He's right there. That's all you need to know. Peppy hair, back in action.
Do a barrel roll.
Game 10 out of 10. Game sold. I bought it.
Star Fox Command. Why isn't there a corridor mode? Why is it on the DS? Why are there strategic missions? Why do I have to stop what I'm doing to move my ship? What's wrong with the controls? Where's the voice acting? Why does Nintendo hate me? Now, Star Fox Command wasn't a huge screw-up of a game.
Why did you exist?
But let's look at why Command is a good game. It progressed the story further than any other Star Fox game had, but it left it incredibly open-ended with over 9 different endings and interpretations. On top of adding new motivations, enemies, and connections, it introduced a whole lot of new characters into the series, some of which were interesting and put a new spin on the story. Others were pointless and should never have existed.
How dare you stand where he stood?
Star Fox Command had a lot of potential. The story was already there to make it a good game, but due to the limitations of the DS, it just wasn't possible to make the gameplay the same as it had been. But you know what? I forgive you, Nintendo. It's not like you had any other hardware that could have potentially run this game properly.
Now, before we talk about the main point of this video, I wanted to make a quick mention of Star Fox 64 3D and why it actually wasn't a main focus of this particular video. The main reason being is because it's really just the original Star Fox 64 game with added gyro controls and local multiplayer, and I don't really feel it adds anything to the series, so. But enough about that, let's get on to the main point of this video. Let's get this horrible sequel on the road. Guys, Star Fox Zero redeeming qualities. Let's do it.
Now let's make this point right now. Star Fox Zero is not a horrible game. In some rights, it's actually a good game. However, in comparison to the point I'm trying to make and what makes a good sequel, nay, what makes a good Star Fox game, it does not hit the mark. To start off with, when I began this game, I was expecting Nintendo to come out with a new Star Fox game with updated graphics on their new-gen console and a new story, continuing on from what happened after Command. But instead, they decided to rehash the original story again, for the 3rd time. Now granted, I know it isn't a one-by-one remake, but the story, the levels, the dialogue, and the scenarios were so obviously similar that I could have quoted the entire game word for word. And while many may think this is a good nostalgic feel for Star Fox, all it really made me think was why Slippy is still on the Star Fox team. Why can't you just stay put? Next, let's talk about levels. I enjoyed playing through most of these levels. Some were exciting, such as the first mission and a few space missions. Others were incredibly tedious and dull, like these levels, and these levels, and these ones. Especially these ones. Star Fox is a game about fast-paced action, space fighter combat. Why the fuck am I in a tiny bird ship looking for things I can hack into? It was actually great to see the original cast back for the voice acting roles and their characters respectively, but to be honest, some of the dialogue was so similar, you could have just easily have taken the dialogue from the original game and thrown it in and nobody would have known the difference.
Now, I have a bigger list of problems, such as the lack of competitive multiplayer, the length of the game, and the repetitiveness of the gameplay, but I could forgive every single little bit of that if it wasn't for the horribly designed, crappy, unchangeable control scheme.
Now I get it, Nintendo, yeah cool, let's try something with the Star Fox game that has a unique twist to it that gravitates around the Wii U. We did it with Splatoon, and that worked, so why not? It's because it didn't fucking work, Nintendo! Not in this case. Star Fox is such a well-known game with a style of gameplay that's similar throughout the series. Granted, there have been some major changes to the game throughout the series, but you know what? A lot of them didn't work. I think the idea of trying something new is good. Implementing new mechanics and ideas into a game is how the series develops and doesn't become just like Call of Duty. But the game itself has to shift. You can't just put on a new Legend of Zelda and say, oh, it's all first person now, Link talks. Okay, that's maybe a bad example, but my point is still valid. All I'm trying to say is that implementing a feature into a game and making it mandatory affects how the game is perceived and overall played. I personally really liked Sonic Unleashed, but then they added in a werewolf and made the stages retarded, and my opinion dropped faster than my bank account money when Smash Bros. Wii U came out. It was a good game. You did well on that one.
When I heard about the new Star Fox game, I was really excited. There hadn't been a new Star Fox game in like 10 years. My childhood self was about to relive some of its fondest gaming memories in the form of a new Star Fox title. But what preceded was just a rehash of that exact same title, a dolled up, slightly modified Barbie with a new hat. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing, except now the hat's glued on, you can't take it off. What if I wanted a different hat, Nintendo? What if I wanted a different hat? If you can take anything from this incredibly long, opinionated review, it's that if I had to choose between playing Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Zero, let's just say I'll be getting my 64 out and plugging it into the TV and putting in the control and playing Star Fox 64 because it was better. It was a better game.